Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Phil Treagus-Evans, CEO and co founder of Giraffe Social, a human first marketing agency that's challenging the traditional agency model. And he's also the author of Human First Marketing, The Art of Being Seen, Trusted, and Remembered. I'm super excited because I think in today's digital age, we're really all craving that, real human connection again. So with that, welcome, Phil. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks, Brett. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I think, you have such a unique spin on things, and I think it's refreshing, but I also think it's super important. So I have a lot of stuff that I want to ask you, but can we start off with your personal story? Can you share your background and give us a sense of how you started in your career?
Yeah, of course. So I started Giraffe Social Media Agency when I was around 22 years old, 21, 22. And I started it with a friend of mine, and we actually met working in a shop together. A shop that I started working in when I was 16. And he was a year older, so he'd been there a year, and we worked there 6, 7 years all through our education. Became good friends and shared a passion for entrepreneurialism, and sort of had ambitions of starting a business. And we thought, what better way to do this than with a friend and to try and do this ourselves. So we tried to start our own social network first, which was, wonderfully naive for two young guys with zero experience and almost no capital whatsoever. Um, but we spent all of our money that we had on a really complicated website, and had no money left for marketing, basically. So we ended up doing our own social, and we realized, oh, we're quite good at this. This is working quite well. And we had friends who were in bands who sort of said, like, would love for you to help us try and get more people to our gigs. And we had family members who had businesses who, this was a time when social was kind of still not massively used for business. Like, it was just starting to have its moment. And we decided one afternoon, hey, do you think we should start a safer business just in case this, huge social network that we're starting doesn't work? I can't remember which of us said it. Probably Kane, to be honest, my co-founder. We decided to start Giraffe, and I always joke that the other website we spent a year planning, and Giraffe we started in an afternoon. And Giraffe is now 13 years old, and the other business hasn't been around for around 12 years. So that's kind of how I got my start, and we started Giraffe, and it's just kind of escalated, just sort of got out of control from there, to be honest.
Yeah, that's a great story. And, there's a couple of really important things in there. The idea that you have this idea to be an entrepreneur. So your original idea, you went all in on. There's always that naivete that we have in the beginning where we've got our dream, which I think is important, because I think if you didn't have the vision, if you didn't have the optimism about it, that same sort of foolish optimism when you don't really recognize the real framework of the game, is the thing that also gives you the courage to take the leap, I think, right? So sometimes we wouldn't even get started if we knew what we were really up against.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think it shows your ability to say, okay, we love the idea of what we're doing. We don't know whether this is the right vehicle for it, because the number of people that shift from what their original idea was, they're so sure that that's going to be the big one. You start doing something, then you realize, oh geez, I mean, I've probably evolved what I've been doing in digital marketing, because I've been doing it for about 20 years, and I've probably evolved what I've done 7 or 8 times. Where I am now compared to where I started in terms of what I'm doing, and technology changes too. But I mean, just the whole idea, your thought process, the evolution of all of that, and growth through doing it, right? So that's a really powerful message. But
Mm.
I'm curious, what was the original idea behind Giraffe? So I know where, like, sort of where it is now, but was that always the idea, or was it just, hey, we want to try to get some additional traffic for our friends and people that want us to be able to drive traffic for them?
I think if I'm being honest, it was more the survival of we want to be entrepreneurs. We want to, we want to start companies. We want to grow companies. And I think everything you just said, I massively agree with. I think young people, there's an opportunity. I had zero responsibilities. I was still living at home, didn't have a mortgage. I didn't even have a partner at the time. It was just sort of like, look, this is we can just sink every hour that we have, into this, and there's very little risk. So I remember having the conversation and saying, let's just fail fast. Let's, if this isn't going to work, let's do it and learn and have it not work so we can move on to the next thing. And I think Giraffe came out of that because we were starting to maybe be hit with the realizations of this is harder than we thought and probably going to need more money. And, maybe there's a bit of a knowledge gap here. And whereas the social side, that was an area that we felt so confident in. And we thought, you know what, this feels like more of a natural fit. And it felt like less of an uphill battle because the people that we were working with were happy and saying, hey, this is working. This is really, really good. So yeah, and stuff just started happening. We started getting inquiries, and before you know it, we had 5 or 6 clients, and we had enough to say, let's quit our jobs and let's try and make this happen and go full time. And that was a big moment as well. I think just turning your back on solid income, by no means a lot of income, and pretty much minimum wage, but that was always our goal when we started, was like, how can we just earn enough to do this for a living, where we work for ourselves and we can grow this business.
Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up because that is a big milestone for people to sort of cut the cord
Mm.
on the security. And let's be honest, right? It's really all an illusion anyway, because no matter what job you have, tomorrow it could be gone.
Yeah.
I worked at a company in the late '90s, so I'm dating myself, in the tech industry, and it was an awesome company. I was doing really well. It was a really great relationship. I thought I might stay there forever. The dot-com bubble burst, and basically the company, they didn't completely dissolve, I had to lay off 150 people myself, and then my turn came, which was no surprise. They were really good. They did the right thing by me and all that stuff, but there was nothing I could have done to control that situation, right? The dot-com bubble burst. You look at COVID, right? There are all these people. I was reading a story during the whole COVID thing where there was a guy that had worked his whole life, and he set up this sports events business. He had all these connections that he built, and he was super excited. He got it off the ground. He just started going. He had signed all these high schools and colleges to do their events, so he was thrilled. COVID hit. It literally put him out of business. You couldn't meet in person anymore. So I think that having that idea, though, where you can officially say, okay, now I'm only going to live off what I can produce, as opposed to collecting a paycheck, people don't recognize the psychological shift
Mm.
and the courage that takes to put all the chips in the middle and say, you know what? I'm going to bet on me and say that I'm going to be able to make this work in a way that I can pay the bills and survive. I mean, obviously, everybody would like to have a lot extra, but you have to have those minimums to even make it work. And so that is a big milestone. So throughout this process, there are a lot of social media agencies, right? So what made you decide, okay, we want to really focus on sort of the human side of this, because that's our angle, that's our niche, that's where we really see the real value in this business, in this industry.
Yeah, really, it's only happened over the last 2, 3, maybe 4 years. Um, so the first 8 or 9 years of Giraffe, we didn't really have a USP, and I think a lot of agencies struggle with that. It's really hard to stand out and be different because we're all ultimately doing the same thing, and there's only so many ways to do it. Um, But over the last few years, I started to see patterns and trends, and we were finding that, the stuff that we were doing with brands that was more focused on people was doing better, and those clients were happier. And we've all seen influencer marketing explode over the last sort of 5 years. Um, well, maybe a little bit longer now, and we started doing things like employee advocacy and managing social media for executives and thinking about personal branding and founder-led businesses. And there was a bit of a moment where we were doing a rebrand ourselves, and I was looking through loads of other agencies and seeing what they were doing, and it's just suddenly hit me that this is, I think, the future of this is human. This is what we need to be focusing our services on, because we were starting to do it without maybe labeling it. And I remember speaking to Kane about it and said, I got this idea, we could call it this. And at that point, it was just a very broad idea and a chaos of ideas bouncing around my head. And then it sort of escalated into, hey, maybe I should write a book about this. Maybe I should, use writing a book as a way to organize all of these chaotic ideas into a framework, into something that could not only be the foundation for how we do marketing at Giraffe, but also may be helpful to marketers everywhere who are looking for a way to improve their results and maybe feel a little bit better about what they do and how they do it. So yeah, that was the inspiration.
That's cool. I mean, that's a really cool origin story for how that went about. And the other thing I really like about your particular story with that and your journey is that so many people believe, because this is what we're taught in business, right? There's a way to start a business. First, you figure out what you do that's totally unique that no one else has ever done, and then you just execute on that. Well, the reality of it is, until you get in the game, it's hard to even know what that looks like. It's
Mm.
certainly really difficult to try to execute on a plan like that. I actually think the more natural way is the way you did it, where you get in the game, you feel things out, you start to identify where those, pockets of opportunity and those sort of genius zones or areas of passion that you have lie. You find the intersection of that, and then you say, this is what we're going to focus on. Because how could you know all of that stuff in advance? Plus, you have the evolution of what you're doing. I mean, the whole industry itself changed, right? I mean, initially, if you look at the origin of social media, it was funny animal and baby pictures, and they were getting millions and millions and millions of views, right? Everybody was excited. Then that got old. Then the over curation, everybody's airbrushed, everything's Photoshop. And I think we've gone over that arc, and I think we're at a point now where people are just starving for authenticity. They want that connection with people. And I'll tell you a quick funny story about my own podcast. So when I always wanted to do this, and I've been in digital marketing for 20 years. And I said, geez, I got a lot of information and tips that I can share, but I also want to learn from other people. And so one of the things that held me up, believe it or not, from starting it is that I believed in order to have a podcast about entrepreneurship, I had to have all the answers, right? If I'm going to share with other people, I got to be the answer guy. And I'm like, but I'm not the most successful entrepreneur that ever lived. So how am I going to do that? And then sort of the light bulb went off, and I said, I don't have to do that. I have to share my journey, to share my experience, of the vulnerability that you show, and the failures as well as the successes are the things that make you human and draw people to you, because you seem real. It's not real if everything you do is perfect the first time you try it. And even if it is, it's not attainable for the average person. So, right? I mean,
And we realize that, I think, as you get older, you suddenly realize that no one knows what they're doing. In every profession, no one knows what they're doing. Everyone is figuring out as they go, and that's okay. And I think, when you're younger, you kind of look at people in professions like, doctors and, like business owners and entrepreneurs, and you think, God, they really understand everything. There's nothing they don't know. Nope, they don't know everything. They're still figuring it out. They're still pulling out Google and asking questions, or ChatGPT now. And I'd say, I think that's okay. And I think the sooner that you sort of figure that out and accept it, the less intimidating stuff like this becomes. Because I started writing a book. I didn't know all the answers. I still don't know all the answers. And I think, like you said, that authenticity and that vulnerability to say, hey, I don't know everything, but this is what I do know, and this is kind of what I've figured out and learned, and I want to share it. I think that's amazing, and I think that's what people appreciate is that honesty. And I deliberately shared my journey when I was writing the book, and posting to LinkedIn all the time and saying like, I'm this many words in, and I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I don't know if this is good or what, and that in itself was powerful, because when the book came out, there were a lot of people who felt ownership over it because they'd been on the journey. They'd seen me struggling and, panicking and doubting myself, and, putting out hundreds of polls about the cover of the book and what what I should be going for and what I shouldn't be going for. And I think that's nice. I think that's, the more people can do that, the better.
Yeah, it's powerful, and it also lets other people know if they're in their own world and they're struggling, because this is what occurred to me, right? In digital marketing, the irony, of course, is that we're more digitally connected than we've ever been, but we're more distant than we've ever been in terms of real relationships. I mean, when I was growing up, there was no internet. So my daily routine in the summer was wake up in the morning, jump on my bike, and I disappeared till dinner time. My parents didn't even know where I was. I was off with my friends, right? Now everything's organized, everything, for better and worse, right? There are things that are better. I'm not pretending like everything was great when I was a kid, but there's just differences. And everything was about the human connection and doing things together, because there wasn't anything else to do. The video games were kind of lame. They existed, but they weren't what they are now, right? There was no cell phone, there was no internet. And so the only engagement you had is when you physically got together with other people. So that's what you did. We went to the parks and played ball all day, um, and I think you develop connections with people in those ways, and memories that really really matter. And so it's important when you have those opportunities to replicate that. So I know you specifically have the term human first marketing. So can you just define with us? I know we've been sort of dancing around it, but what exactly does that mean?
Mm,
And why do you think that the marketing world really needs that right now?
sure. So human first marketing is about putting people back at the center, back at the heart of marketing strategy. And there's lots of different ways to do that, but I think all of it is really underpinned by the realization that businesses are just a group of people, and customers are just a group of people, and it's an exchange of value between the two. And I think in today's world of data and metrics and automations, and like you say, this paradox of being the most connected and the least connected we've ever been all at the same time, we've lost that kind of that idea that, hey, this is, we talk about like B2B and B2C, and it's just all people to people, right? I mean, businesses are just groups of people. So that really is the foundation of human first marketing, is starting with people, starting with that realization, and sort of saying, okay, let's develop strategies based on that, rather than thinking about customers like data points on a spreadsheet and trying to combine them all into neat little customer avatars and these sorts of things. Yeah, it's kind of lifting the rock up and saying, okay, let's just have a look at this chaos and plan for it.
I like that approach. I agree. I think sometimes in business, especially, again, another sort of ironic or paradoxical thing is, now that there are so many frameworks, there are so many tools, there are so many different paradigms for the way people set things up. We've gotten lost in the idea of trying to create the perfect structure or the perfect process and lost sight of the fact that at the end of the day, right? I don't care if we were cavemen. You know what I mean? If I've got a bone and you've got a fire and I need fire and you need a bone, right? We're going to exchange value because that's what it is.
I'd need at
It's
least 3 bones for a fire, I think. Right?
fair enough. Fair enough. I'll give you two and a half.
All right,
But
deal.
but exactly right. I mean, from the early times of barter, the whole idea was exchange of value. If you have something I want, I have something you want. It makes
Yeah.
sense for us to trade. And I've taught that a lot when I would do any sort of coaching for entrepreneurs. Is look, stop overcomplicating and worrying about whether this autoresponder sequence has enough like messages in the pipeline, and whether the decision tree on this different funnel goes in 6 different ways or 5 different ways, and just think about, is this valuable for the customer?
Yeah.
Like, put yourself in the customer's shoes and say, are you providing value here? Or is this some sort of a mechanical gimmick designed to, because I don't care at the end of the day, the best funnel structure, the best funnel, the best this, the best that, if there isn't an inherent exchange of value, it's not going to work anyway, not long anyway, right?
Yeah, and I
Um,
think that's the issue that we have in marketing is that I think because of pressures that we have for instant results and pressures, whether it's as an agency and having the pressure of the marketing manager that we're working with, and they've got the pressure of the CMO above them and the CEO, and they're, I call it the cascade of blame. um, all of this pressure means that we sacrifice thinking about marketing in a long term sort of fashion and think about, well, how can I generate a sale this week? What can I do that's going to turn this person from not knowing me to buying my product as quickly as possible? Whereas I'm much more of the belief that we need to be thinking long term. We need to be thinking about lifetime customer value, and how do we not just sell this person a product, but how do we make this person have a relationship with our brand so that they advocate for us and they tell people about us and they continue to buy from us. And I think if you start with that as the goal, it changes how you think about funnels and marketing strategies, because you're not so hyped on the, well, how do we just get someone to click buy on the website? Oh, well, if the button's green, then the more, I just think, come on, like these are people. Like let's call it what it is, and actually try and like you say, provide value that makes their life a little bit better, and the rewards will come back.
Yeah, I've always heard the expression, and I always believed it, that a great offer can overcome bad copy, but the best copy in the world isn't going to sell an offer that stinks, right? So,
Yeah.
and it's funny that you bring up the long-term idea, because again, dealing with a lot of entrepreneurs, one of the things I get a lot is, and I'm not a social media expert or anything like that, but they do ask me a lot about the social media. Well, I've been posting, and I'm posting every day. It's been a month or two, and I'm not getting a lot of engagement or clicks or anything. And the message I always say, and I'd be curious to see your take on this, but what I always tell them is, look, everybody wants that. It's going to be a small percentage that are going to, visibly, physically engage with your stuff. But the reality of it is, if you're putting out good content, if it's getting reach, if people are at least seeing it, you're still moving people along the pipeline. You're starting to get them to get to know you. They may not react to stuff initially, but there's value in it inherently by doing it, because you're sharing your message, you're sharing what value you can provide, and it does make an impact. McDonald's runs ads every day. There's not a person in the United States, probably the world, that doesn't know who McDonald's is, right? But they keep running ads because they want to be in your awareness. So do you believe that because social media is sort of a long-term prospect, that there's value even if you aren't getting clicks, or should we be adjusting everything we're doing if we aren't getting that instant engagement?
I think that's a big question, and I don't think there's a sort of a black and white answer. I think it's probably a bit more nuanced than that. And I would say if someone is posting every day and not getting any engagement over, say, like a few months, maybe there's an issue with the content. Maybe there's an issue with who the audience is and how you're reaching them. Um, but I do agree with what you say, because the amount of times I speak to people who have never engaged with anything I post on LinkedIn, and they say, "Oh, I love your stuff on LinkedIn," and you think, okay. Show me a little bit of love every now and then.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't know who's seeing this stuff and consuming it without necessarily being sort of engaged with it in a way that's tangible and sort of measurable, if you like. But what I would say, that my advice is always, I think a lot of people feel like they do need to post more than they do. And I think people fall into a trap of posting for the sake of posting, not necessarily with a goal in mind. And I think this is Gary V, right? This is you should be posting 100 times an hour and all of this sort of stuff. And yeah, maybe, but unless you've got something valuable to say and you're bringing value, you're just going to annoy people. It's just you're going to saturate your audience. they're going to think, "God, another post." Like, if it's not giving them value. So my advice is always, if you're posting, say, every day and you're not seeing any engagement, post every other day. And on the days that you're not posting, go out and comment on 50 posts. If you want engagement, go out and give engagement. You get what you give, and it's reciprocal. So, if you want to increase your engagement, get out there and be active, join conversations, show expertise on other people's content, show them appreciation for what they're doing. That's the stuff that will really make the difference. And you'll almost definitely see more engagement on your posts.
I love that approach, and I totally agree. I think that the irony is, and I see this even in real life social situations. You have the kid or the person that's like, oh, that group of people doesn't like me, because nobody talks to me. So then you go and you talk to the group, and they say, oh, that guy doesn't like us. He never comes over and talks to us, right? I mean, if you want to have a friend, you've got to be a friend, right? If you
Right.
want to get engagement, you've got to engage, and you got to be open and show sort of a willingness and a desire to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could be intimidating other people and not even realize it. They feel like you don't want them to talk to you either. And so I don't think the digital space is all that different. I mean, it's not that they're intimidated, but at the same time, there's no incentive there. The minute that you show some love or some value to what somebody else is doing, well, now they start to feel like, hey, that's pretty cool. It's reassuring and reaffirming for me. And there's just that natural law of reciprocity where we then want to share, and we want to be that way ourselves. And so I
It,
think, yeah, that's a
it,
powerful
it,
message.
there's suddenly a relationship there. The next time they see your post, you're not someone they don't know. You're that person who commented the other day and they had a brief conversation with, and that's different. You've created a different dynamic there, and that's connection, right? I mean, that's what we're all aiming for here. And again, I think because of the amount of metrics and data, we forget that actually what we want isn't numbers on how many people liked the post or how many people, we want conversations. You want what I would call meaningful engagement. You want people who actually, they care about what you say and they're interested and they're taking it on board, and they're not just double tapping on Instagram on everything they scroll past. It's not, we don't want post for post's sake. We don't want engagement for engagement's sake. We want something real and authentic.
100%. And what's funny about this is it parallels the actual human experience so well. I've
Yeah.
gone to a lot of conferences. I've shaken hands with people, gotten business cards, and I'll tell you, when I get back to my office, or back away from the conference, I looked at the cards, and even if I could remember who the people were, I had no confidence to reach out to anybody because I didn't really get to know them. All I did was shake a hand and get a business card. It was
Yeah.
transactional. Same
Yeah.
way we would, right? The difference is when I went to events and went to, the happy hour or whatever, sat down on a couch and had a conversation with somebody, that's somebody that I could easily go and reach out to after and have
Yeah.
confidence that they would come back to me. And I
Yeah.
think that we lose sight of that because of the ease that technology connects us. It feels like it should be just a numbers game where you want to just get out there to as many people. But at the end of the day, it's still about relationships. And if you build those, the people online or offline will connect with us. And if we don't, there's no incentive or there's no sort of impetus to do that. And I think that, so again, it just, at the end of the day, it just comes down to getting back to being human and
Yeah.
sort of treating people the way we would want to have that as well. So speaking of that, what about AI? What's your take on the rise of AI in marketing? I mean, should we be excited? Should we be worried? Or something else?
Both. um, I don't think we should all be panic building bunkers in our yards, but I do think we need to be aware of the risk. I think a lot of people think, oh, Phil, the human first guy, he hates AI, he must be anti AI, but it's not true. I mean, I use AI every single day, and I think most people do now. Um, it's more about how we use it, and I'm really keen to make sure that when AI is used in marketing, it's used to free up space and time to be more creative, to to form more connections and to have more conversations like this, rather than replace stuff like this. If you can automate, analysis of, data or admin or things that, they're not the funnest, most human sort of thing you can do, brilliant. Do that. Like, definitely do that. But if you're using AI to just generate content where you're not inputting any ideas or any of your own sort of flavor on anything, yeah, I'm not a fan. And I think this, for me, is why human first marketing is such an opportunity. I don't just think it's the right thing to do. I also think it's an opportunity, because as more and more people use AI in their marketing, we are going to see just more and more homogenization, content just looking the same, sounding the same. We're already seeing that. I mean, I think I saw the other day that they estimate over 50% of content on LinkedIn is AI generated, which, yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's only going up. So you sort of start thinking, well, how do I stand out when everyone else is doing the same thing? And I said this to Kane, my co-founder, this morning. Like, human first is about looking at everyone zigging and going, how do we zag? How do we do this different? And if you put people in your content and you show up and people can see you and you're having conversations, and you're going to be a breath of fresh air. And I think the more AI takes over, as it inevitably will, the more that approach will make you stand out. I often say to our clients that, when we're struggling to find a USP, the most unique thing about any business is its people. You can't replicate that. People are unique, and the combination of people that you have in your business isn't mirrored anywhere else. So what better way to stand out than to bring those people to the forefront and let people kind of get a feel for who you are and who the team are and what you're about, what you believe. Yeah, for me, that's the ultimate way to stand out.
Yeah, I like that and fully agree. I've often said I think we're sort of entering the age of authenticity, because people are getting sick of, you could tell, right, when everything is bot generated. And I also fully agree with your idea about AI. I think it's can be a fabulous tool. The minute that it starts to drown out your own voice, or it starts to take over that uniqueness and humanity of what you do, that's where you have to draw the line and say, okay, use it for things we can automate and simplify, where there's no human value in doing it yourself that way. But when it comes to connections, when it comes to even content, I mean, it can do things to make your content look better, sound better, whatever else. But the voice shouldn't change from being yourself.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts when I see all these things. Oh, start an AI podcast. What do I want a machine like creating episodes for me for? I don't. I mean, the
Yeah.
reason I do this is so I can have conversations with people like you. I learn so much. And when else would we have an opportunity to sit down for 45 minutes and chat? So it's,
Is this a bad time to tell you that I'm actually a robot, Brett, and this is AI? And I'm
I was wondering, because I saw a little glitch in your
Yeah,
glasses, and
yeah,
I
yeah.
wasn't
It's not
sure.
perfect. If I lifted up my hand, you'd see I've got 6 fingers as well. It's not quite right, but yeah, no,
That's
I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think I think there's a danger with AI, and I see it on LinkedIn a lot, where people are very binary on it. It's good or it's bad. There's people who love it, and everyone else hates it. And there's demonizing going on. If, you use AI, and, I can't stand people who use it. I don't think that's helpful. I think, when the internet first appeared, I'm sure there were similar conversations. I remember being a kid and my mum not wanting to bank on the internet or buy things on the internet. And, we look back on that now and we think, God, that's crazy. Why wouldn't you, why would you not? But I think we're sort of in that place at the moment where, if you've used AI, that's bad. If you don't, that's good. And there's more nuance to it than that. Like you say, it's, you can use ChatGPT to help you create content, but it shouldn't be that's the whole process. You load it up and just say, write me a LinkedIn post on leadership, and then you copy and paste it and stick it out. At least say what your thoughts are and your ideas, and then take it and tweak it to be your voice. And it can be that there's a blend. It doesn't have to be one end of the polarity, of like using it, not using it. There's a middle ground that can be helpful and still effective.
Yeah, and I think it's great to use as an organizing tool. The thing for
100%.
me is I don't have it write a lot of my content, but I will have it organize my ideas. So if I want to if I want to create an episode about X, Y, or Z, I'll
Mm.
put in what are the key points. So it will give me sort of the outline. Then I say, okay, good. Now I'll talk to each of those myself from my
Yeah.
perspective. It's my thoughts, my ideas, my voice. But at the same time, I'm making sure I'm hitting all the things that are important. Obviously, if
Yeah.
there's stuff left out of that, I'll still add it in as well. But I really like to use it as a tool to organize and create outlines for things, because it's easy to create the structure that way. But totally,
I one of the ways I've used it that I've found most effective is actually to use it like a sparring partner and to say, this is my idea. This is what I'm thinking I'm going to do. Tell me why I'm wrong. What am I missing? And ask it to challenge me and sort of see if it changes the way I think or if it actually helps me go, no, do you know what? I am on the right lines here. And I found that quite an effective tool because it's, you know, if I want to have someone disagree with me, I'll just pick up the phone and speak to Kane. But but with AI, it's a little bit, it's not quite as emotionally scarring, I guess. So it's helpful to just have that conversation and get it to pick holes in my thinking and sort of, you don't know what you don't know, right? So it's sort of getting them to spot the little blind spots that maybe I've not thought about.
that's a cool idea. I'm going to actually try that. I haven't done that, but I really do like that idea. So, all right. So let's say somebody wants to do their marketing differently. They say, okay, I believe in this idea. Is there a step or steps they should start with, or how should they begin that process if they haven't been doing it already?
This is where I unashamedly plug the book, right? And say you should go buy the book and read it. Um, start with people. Start with understanding where you're at with people. Who do you have in your team? How could you involve those people? Do you understand your customers? Like, just start with remembering that these are people. Um, I always say the first step is like include more faces in your marketing, whether that's getting your team out, getting them to post content, whether it's inviting your customers to collaborate on something and doing some like user generated type content. Just find places that you can bring more people and more humanity into what you're doing, and then just see the results. They speak for themselves. It's one of those things that if you look at like content that goes out on Instagram or LinkedIn, and you look at the percentage of engagement on posts that have faces versus those that don't, I mean, it's a huge difference. A huge difference. So yeah, more faces in your marketing would be my succinct answer.
I think that's really great advice. I will tell you a funny story, about Gary Vee, because you had brought him up before, and the how prolific he is as a poster, despite the fact that he has a lot of really good ideas. I agree with you. It's almost to a point of overwhelm or exhaustion. I don't know how he isn't totally exhausted, because to just churn stuff out. But a funny story, when he was getting his beginnings and he was doing Wine Library TV,
Mhm.
his YouTube channel, which is how he got his start. He always jokes and he says, the first 100 episodes or first 2 years, no one watched it, but I still created it. But one of the things that he did that I think is really, really smart, and it's something very few people would do, it helps separate him, is when he was doing the show, anybody that emailed in for a wine recommendation, for whatever else, like he would encourage people to email him. He responded personally. He said what he did every day was he made his show, but he spent 2 to 2.5 hours just responding to emails personally. He went through each and every one, listened to what the person said, went back, and then he would reference it on the show too. Like he would shoot an episode and he'd say, "Hey John, you wanted that? This is the Chardonnay you want to go with that meal that you're making on Friday night or whatever." But the point was he understood the importance of the human personal connection.
Yeah.
He leveraged the idea of these digital like mediums to do it, but at the same time he always understood the value of that connection and building those relationships with people, because that's irreplaceable. That's
Yeah.
also something that gives you a competitive advantage, that no matter what new widget or technology or whatever, competitors can't just come in and take your customers or your prospects. if you have a deep relationship with them, because that's worth more to a lot of people than just a pure transaction. So I think to your point, it's a great way to do it. To just simplify, get human with it, and engage with people and see what happens. And that will oftentimes give you answers to the test. So throughout your entrepreneurial journey, at least to this point, what lessons have you learned? Like, what has being an entrepreneur taught you? What is the evolution of where you started to where you are now taught you along the way?
Another big question. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole and speak to you for 3 or 4 hours. I think I often, when people ask me what's the advice I would give if I could kind of go back and give myself some advice when I started, it would be to have more conversations, conversations like this. I think I had a tendency to be quite insular and quite competitive, and not wanting to speak to other agencies because, well, they're the competition. And I remember the first time another agency phoned us and they were interested in partnering, and I was very skeptical. I was very like, why are they phoning us? I don't understand. And it really held us back. My advice now would be, if whatever goal you're trying to achieve, whether it's entrepreneurial or otherwise, find 5 people that have already done it and go and make friends with them. Go speak to them and find out what their journey was like and what they did and what worked and what didn't. And you will cut out years and years of pain and misery. In the last sort of 4 or 5 years, Giraffe has grown. I have grown so much faster from having conversations with people who are way smarter than I am, and learning from them, and being humble enough to say, hey, you've done what I'm trying to do. How did you do it? And you'd be amazed how often people are willing to give you some time and to just have a chat with you on the phone, or send you a couple of ideas on WhatsApp. And yeah, it's you fall back in love with humanity when you start getting responses back and help. And so my biggest lesson and my biggest advice is to speak to people, and don't assume you know everything, because you don't. And there's people there who've been there and done it, and speaking to them is the most valuable thing you can do.
That's, it's excellent advice. And as you're saying it, it resonates with me so deeply, because the funny thing is, I was the same guy. I was in digital marketing and I believed productivity, right? Getting stuff done was more important. And it's all I ever did. I focused on executing and building products and getting sales letters done and all this other stuff. And the funniest thing happened. I was have colleagues through Skype at the time, which is now defunct, but and one of them was saying to me, look, there's this event coming up. We only get a chance as digital marketers in the space that we're in to get together a couple times a year. Come to the event. I'm like, I gotta pay for a hotel. I gotta pay for a flight. Like, it's gonna be a couple days out of business. Like, this is a waste of my time. Well, trust me, just come to the event. The funny thing is, I went to the event and I understood for the first time why people go to events, because the relationships that you build over a weekend, hanging out with people, and the partnerships that come out of it. What I realized when I got there is, this guy met this guy who are this, have this great business that they're running. They met at an event. They were talking over coffee one morning, and the whole idea came about, and that's why they're where they are. And then these people, they got together, and it was like thing after thing after thing, all these partnerships, all of this other stuff. And so it's literally the biggest single regret that I have, is that throughout my journey, I was so isolated.
Mm.
And it feels isolating. It's one of the reasons I started the podcast, because I wanted to give a voice to everybody, to let them know, if you're an entrepreneur and you're sitting behind your computer trying to get it all done, you're not doing it the right way.
Yeah.
It's okay. We've been there, but you've got to connect with other people. You got to build those relationships. It will get you to where you want to go. I estimate I could have got to where I was going 5 years faster, at least, if I had just connected with people.
Yeah, I feel the exact same. And I wish I could go back and give me a shake and say, look, stop being so competitive about everything.
I know it is funny, but I think part of that is just the way that we're trained. You're sort of brought up with this whole competition thing, and it's always like that. And they always glorify getting stuff done, and so you feel like, so I think in a lot of ways that is the case, but you know, it's good that we at least recognize it at some point, right? So so in the process of writing your book, I'm curious about this too. Is there anything, obviously everybody knows it's a lot of work, but was there something that surprised you about the journey of writing the book or the process that you went through?
Um, I think the surprise was probably that the most difficult thing was the stuff I wouldn't have thought was difficult. So, for example, uh, picking a title, picking a cover, things that seem insignificant. The book is like 92,000 words long. You'd think that was the challenging bit, but that was the bit I enjoyed. That was the bit that really, like, I just found really naturally came to me. Like, I remember sitting in a coffee shop with a friend of mine with a notepad out, and we were literally writing down book titles and ripping them apart and being like, "That's awful. You can't call it that." And and just really banging my head against a wall around that. So that was probably one of the surprising things. But I think perhaps a more useful thing for your listeners, other than me just losing my mind over book titles, is that I would really advise everyone to, especially non-fiction, to find a collection of people who are willing to read as you write. So someone gave me this advice quite early on, and I built a cohort of like early readers made up of other agency founders, like heads of marketing at some quite big organizations, friends, family, just sort of around 15 people. And I would send them a third of the book at a time. So I'd write a third, I would edit it myself, then I would send it to the cohort, and I'd send them a Google survey where they'd have to basically rip it apart, go line by line, and say that's not true or this is rubbish. And the word clunky came up more than I would like. um, and just it made it a better book. I think the first round of feedback I remember was like 7,000 words. Um,
Wow.
and I just went through the whole thing, and like some of it I didn't agree with, and I said, no, did you know what? I'm going to keep that in there. And other stuff, I was like, oh my God, yeah, you're so right. I need to change that. So yeah, that would be my biggest advice: is don't do it on your own. Like, find a group of people who are willing to give you that time, and then listen to the feedback, and take it on board, because the book is undoubtedly far, far better because of the collective wisdom that was sort of put into it by that cohort.
Yeah, I think that's great. Look, the best writers in the world have editors, right? So it's not like they write a book and then they submit it and the publisher throws a cover on it. I actually read a book about writing called On Writing Well by this author William Zinsser.
Yeah, I've
And
read
one
it.
of the funny things is I found it. Have you heard of the book?
Yeah, I've read the book.
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing. The
yeah,
chapter that blew me away, though, is first of all, I found it compelling, which was weird because like it's a book about writing, but this is actually a really compelling read. But the thing that blew me away was when you get to the chapter where he shows you the unedited version and the edited
oh,
version. I
right,
was like,
yeah,
because it was so good. And you're like, that was the original version of this chapter. Like before it was edited, it was clunky.
yeah.
And I mean, it was amazing, the difference. So the power of having multiple people in that review cycle, I think, and
Well,
if you do it early, like you did, that's smart. Because then even through ideation, you can make edits before you get too far.
yeah, and I had 3 stages of editing. So I had my own edit, which I would wait usually a month after I've written something, so that I'm coming back with fresh eyes. Then there was the cohort, and then I was in that position where I was like, oh, I don't think I need an editor, because I'm editing it myself. I've got the cohort, like everything's fine. And then I spoke to a friend of mine called Robin Waite, who's also an author,
Oh
and he
yeah,
was
I
like,
know Robin.
"Oh, awesome, yeah." So he
I
was
yeah,
like,
I talked with.
you should get an editor. Like, it's he really sort of advocated for it, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I ended up speaking to an editor, and she looked at the introduction and just sent me back just so much red ink all over this intro that I thought was fine. And I was like, oh, I think I do need an editor. And that was really valuable, because she was coming at it from a very different perspective. It was less about the content and more about structure and challenging like big statements that I was making, where she'd say, "Well, is this true? Like, what do you have to back this up?" And it was so helpful. Again, it challenged me in a different way. So yeah, the book, I mean, it went through several, probably about 6 or 7 versions before it was finished.
Very cool. All right. So where can people find you, find your products, find your services? Where can they connect with you?
So the book is on Amazon, Human First Marketing. You can find me on LinkedIn is usually kind of the place I'm probably most active. Just Phil Treagus-Evans, and then it's Giraffe Social is the name of the agency. So anyone who needs sort of any support with social, that's the place for that.
Perfect. Thanks for that. All right. I have one last question I've got to ask because I'm always curious of what people are going to say. And that's, what's
Mm.
your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Ooh. I don't want to repeat myself by saying speak to people.
That's okay if
um,
that's what it is.
I think my biggest advice is just start. I think my wife is a photographer and she is insanely talented, and she was working in other jobs and had dreams of being a photographer, and she'd been putting it off. And we spoke about it one day and I said, you just need to start. Don't overthink it. Start a Facebook page, put it out there, see what happens. I think sometimes people want to perfect the idea before they get it out, and sometimes you just have to go. You just have to say, look, I'm just going to start, and it might be a complete car crash to start with, but it'll be my car crash, and I'll be able to slowly build it and make it better. And just like that chapter that you talked about, that you read the finished article, you wouldn't imagine that it originally looked the way it did. And that's true of any business. Giraffe at 13 years in is dramatically different. I mean, it's a different business entirely to what it was in the first 5 years even. So yeah, I think that would be my parting wisdom. Just start. Don't overthink it. Just get going.
Awesome. Great advice. All right. Perfect. Thanks. With that, it's just about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again, Phil, so much for sharing all your insights and great tips with us. Find Phil on LinkedIn at Phil Treagus-Evans. That's Phil Treagus-Evans to follow his work and connect with him. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.